So I was trying to film a video for my other channel and I tried like 19 times. It was not I kept getting interrupted. I don't even know what the deal is. So anyway, my phone is like completely on silent and I've gotten rid of all of the distractions. I've fed the cats. So hopefully everything is like a-okay for tonight. I have no idea what the deal is. It's just been a very it's like what? Anyway, so I'm doing my best, y'all. Um, so I wanted to talk about something that irritates me when it comes to actually, this one isn't more abuse resources, it's more relationship resources or like self help resources. I've mentioned before, I grew up in a church that, no, that's not even, it's not a church. I grew up in a new age, new thought kind of environment, and they basically demonized anger. They really loved that whole phrase of because we were like faux Buddhist. Being angry is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I was like I disagreed so vehemently with that. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, I was right. I was correct. And so I think the problem is that people do not make a distinction between anger and rage. Those 2 things are not the same. And so, you'll get they seem like they're well-meaning people who are just, trying to help. And they come in and they talk to abuse victims about being bitter and like holding on to anger, blah, 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 etc. And they have all of these statements about how anger is bad. And I think it can be a struggle because I think victims of abuse who are trying to be good, moral, ethical people who are trying to, live in a way that is the right way to live, they recognize that there is danger, there is damage when you have like a certain kind of anger, but I don't think they recognize that it's not that it's the anger that's the problem, it's the rage. And also that it's not so much the feeling itself, but like what the person does with that feeling. So you can be angry and express it in a way that is healthy and not dominating other people and not destructive and destroying and damaging. Um, the construct that I really like is the one that basically says that you pay attention to your emotions, you don't let them drive the car, but you get information from them. Anger is an emotion that lets you know, "Oh, my boundaries are being violated. Something's happening to me that's not okay, and I need to be moved into doing something on my own behalf." So hey, happy Friday. Should I just like move the live to 7:30? I mean, I can. I can do it whenever I want to. I want to like I want a place that's consistent where people can go to, for when things are not great. So I could move it. I just for some reason I thought 7 was like a good time for people, but you're usually coming on and like, OMG, you're doing things. So like I can move it. That's not a problem. But whatever. Like so anyway, Um, I was talking about anger and how people demonize anger, and I don't think the issue is anger. I hear you. It is happy. Making a late supper for grandma. Usually 7 is good, but we've been out of town lately. Oh, I hope doing fun things. I haven't been going out of town, but I have been doing a lot of hiking, like in my local nature preserve, and it's so nice to just be like in a new place. It feels refreshing, like, as long as it's not overwhelming or for, like, a sad reason. Um, how we express it can be wisely, maturely, or explosive. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, anyway, I, yeah, so I basically was talking about how, like, when I was a kid, the kind of, like, new age, new thought, faux Buddhist thing that I was in, you had a lot of people saying, "Oh, being angry is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." And I was not a fan of that, because I felt like there was something more to it, even if I couldn't articulate it back then, and now I'm an adult and I love. Yeah, because summer's, like, the best time for that. Yeah. Wait a minute, his family or your family? Because I find that visiting the abuser's family is often an exercise in, like, endurance and try not to be abused even more by, like, the extended family. Yeah, because they almost always back the abuser. The abuser didn't become who they are out of nowhere usually. So I feel for when you end up going to visit the abuser's family with the abuser, and then it's just basically like the abuser and then the reflections and echoes of the abuser kind of like in your direction. So I hope that's not what you're dealing with. I hope it's family that loves you, and family that is supportive and not abusive or supporting the abuser. Yeah. I wish people would like warn victims of abuse. My family the last 2 weeks, I'm lucky his family is nice anyway. What? I mean, that's good, but hopefully they recognize he's a problem and that things should happen. um, so yeah, I the extended family dynamics are pretty tricky, because often, like, I think it starts off with a lot of victims of an abuse dynamics that you don't wanna make the other person look bad, or you think it's your fault, so you don't wanna make yourself look bad, and then that kind of secrecy compounds. Anyway, not to, like, talk about your situation. Um, so yeah, getting back to the, anger thing. So I think that when we say things to people that we maybe learned off of something like Oprah back in the day, or, you know, my faux Buddhist experience, which was, that anger was like a bad emotion. And I didn't agree with that. And so learning that anger is actually information that lets you know, like, oh, my boundaries are being crossed or violated, or something is happening to me that's not okay. Now, of course, that's going to depend because the abuser, they get angry, they misthink that that is happening to them, that someone's crossing their boundaries. But when their boundaries are basically like everything that you are and your things and other people's things and everything like that, where they don't have control and power, that's not the same thing. They're misthinking. So their anger response then often goes into rage, where victims often push down their anger response because they think that anger is wrong and they shouldn't be angry. Or maybe they don't want to reflect any kind of similar emotion that the abuser has. So, like, learning to handle that anger or emotions, I think, is a really important thing for victims of abuse. And I feel like relationship resources don't handle it very well. Abuse resources, I think, are getting better over time about handling it, but I think separating anger from rage, and then also looking at, well, how are we acting in that emotion, that makes the most impact of whether or not it's appropriate or not appropriate. Like, you can be angry and take a good, reasonable, appropriate action, or you could be angry and take a bad action. And you can be in a rage and, like, if I'm in a rage on behalf of my child and protecting my child, let's say from a random person trying to hurt them, I'm not going to think that rage is bad. But generally speaking, most rage in the home, I think, is probably going to be bad. So, anyway, I came across, I I actually don't like nonviolent communication at all. And so I've seen people think that if they just express things in a nonviolent way, that it means that violence will not occur. And so one of the things that happens in nonviolent communication is that a lot of people in nonviolent communication think that they can't be angry and they can't express anger. But the thing is, the anger is still there. We're human beings. And nobody's gotten rid of anger. It's a tool. And so you end up with people that, like, they've pledged allegiance to this nonviolent communication, and instead they become really passive aggressive because they don't understand the difference between anger and rage. And so when you like rage is violent, anger is not necessarily intrinsically violent. And also, I am personally not of the opinion that all violence is bad. I think you can act in specific circumstances in a way that would be considered to be violent, but like it's an appropriate response. Like I'm going to defend my child if someone's trying to harm him or something like that. So, yeah, nonviolent communication. Oh, that was another thing I found. Okay. Okay. Sometimes I come across stuff and it's clearly from an abuser's perspective. And it's always really interesting to me to see them write it out, but they don't recognize it. So I'm going to read something like that because I think this is really fascinating. Okay. The poster writes, this is in our trauma therapy. They wrote, finally, in trauma therapy. And they said, um, now I can't unsee how I am caring and still acting as I did when I was a child. Always had to get my way is a defense mechanism to help me protect myself. I don't see how being whiny and begging for whatever it is that my parents are saying no to until they finally break down and say okay is a defense mechanism, but here we are. I couldn't accept the word no, and I still haven't been able to. For the past 2 years I've been in this relationship, blah blah blah, and she goes on to talk about it. I was like, "Ma'am, ma'am." So essentially, what I find is a lot of the people in the trauma spaces or the CPTSD spaces, which is why I rarely recommend them, a lot of times are abusers who are justifying their own poor behavior because they're like, "Oh, it's a trauma response. Oh, it's CPTSD." And so the thing is, there are victims with trauma responses and victims with CPTSD that are not responding in these ways. The fact that this person literally wrote, like, "I couldn't accept the word no," but that was a defense mechanism, is crazy to me. And so that's why I like to say, this from the perspective of, like, we can have become an unsafe person, and then we can learn to make safe choices. So it doesn't mean, like, you're necessarily bad forever, but if you've done bad things, just washing your hands of it by saying, "Well, it was a trauma response." It's like, "Oh, was it?" Because other people have had that trauma and have not taken those actions. Like not recognizing someone's no and then going into your adult relationships after having been what seems like being a spoiled child. I mean, I don't understand how that's not being a spoiled child. Um, so basically, like going into your adult relationships, not accepting the words no, not respecting someone else's boundaries, and then going, "Oh, yeah, but that's my trauma response." It's a defense mechanism. Ooh, we wanna be real careful with that. So I just in general, whenever you see support spaces, you'll often end up with people who are using those spaces and they're not safe people and for some reason don't seem to recognize it straightforwardly, like maybe the way that their victim would. Um, yeah, so I thought that was really interesting to see it from the abuser's perspective. And actually, let me see if I can find another one because I always find these pretty fascinating when the abusers, let's see, write about their own abuse. Okay. Oh, I wrote an article. Oh, okay. So this came from our Am I the Ex Now Deleted. Um, okay, so this guy says basically he says, "I love my girlfriend very much. She's super hardworking and he says she's a super hardworking girl and she spends a lot of her time on classes to get the highest grades possible for applying to nursing school. When she's not doing that, she's doing chores or cutting down on her ever growing to do list. And when she's not doing that, she's spending 2 hours a day playing The Sims. This is where the problem comes in." Okay, he describes a very busy, responsible person who's doing a lot of things. After all the stuff she does, Aaliyah doesn't have as much time to spend with me as she could. She's a perfectionist too, so when she's doing the more serious stuff like school, she puts in more effort than necessary, which is time consuming. It really got to me that even knowing this, she'll spend so much time on The Sims. It's something frivolous she's doing when we already only get so little time together. She's also an adult, so essentially playing digital dolls almost every day is kind of something she should have grown out of by now. I decided to step in and have her cut back on this. Okay, I obviously didn't delete the whole game, but I figured deleting the little save file she was working on would deter her from spending so much time on it. That decision backfired tremendously. When she logged onto her game, she thought there was some glitch and she kept restarting it until I explained to her that I removed the saves. She absolutely flipped out on me, said she'd been playing that save file since 2017 and I had ruined years of game progress. I told her she was overreacting because she still has the game and she could just remake her same little characters if it mattered so much. But it doesn't need to. And maybe now she can focus on more adult interests like loved ones. I started to feel a little bad once I realized it might not be as easy to redo her character as I initially thought. So, am I the asshole? I was like, this person is abusive and has no idea. Doesn't respect her boundaries and right? Someone who doesn't respect her boundaries over herself. He describes someone who's very busy. I don't know if they live together or not, but he's like, "Oh, she has chores." Like if they live together, and she's doing all the chores. The other thing too is like he had access to where she lives. So if it's not just her, it's definitely he like if they're not living together, he has access to her space to be able to delete this game. But the fact that he didn't like it, he decided she should stop. So he was going to go in and steal and delete from her and has no idea like I'm the abuser here. He doesn't see it as controlling. He doesn't see it as coercive. He doesn't see it as trying to control another adult person. He thinks he knows what's best for her. He thinks he's right. So anyway, what did I write? Oh, I wrote the victim and the commenters in the post and subsequent posts argue they want to argue about whether or not the victim should be playing The Sims. And I was like, it's an easy argument to get sucked into. Is it childish for an adult to play video games? Is it okay for an adult to play video games if they've done enough work around the house? If he wants her to have more time for him, why doesn't he do more housework so she has more free time? Is playing The Sims digital dolls? And I said, you see how easy it is to get caught up in whether an abuser is what what the abuser is arguing, and then you're going back and forth arguing over reality and whether playing The Sims is like playing with dolls. It lets the abuser frame the discussion and it misses the overarching paradigm of abuse that shows up even in this person's mistelling of the story. He calls what she's doing frivolous. He also says he decided to step in and have her cut back on this. He does recognize she's an adult, but if she's an adult, why does she not get to decide how she spends her time? Why are you stealing her property? He also calls her like a girl and stuff. So, anyway, when you're talking to an abuser, they don't necessarily recognize like they're an abuser. They just think I'm right. This other person should do what I tell them to do. They owe me XYZ. And so it can get really hard for people to recognize that this is an abuse dynamic. But at the core is an adult deciding for another adult what that adult should be doing and then exercising control over that adult to make them do it. They want to make. They feel it. They feel entitled to do that. Um, Whereas a normal person might say, "Oh, I'm dating this really busy person, and I don't like that she doesn't have time for me, and it really hurts me that she's like deciding to play The Sims instead of making more time for me. And maybe this is not the relationship for me. Maybe this is letting me know where I stand in the relationship." You can feel that way. You can make that decision for yourself. What you don't get to do is to decide what she's doing is wrong and that you're going to make and punish her essentially for playing The Sims. Oh my gosh, yeah. So whenever I'm looking at like dynamics, where the abuser doesn't recognize what they're doing, it's generally speaking because they think they're right and there's a primacy of rightness and they get to do what they want. And there's actually these uh, there's a documentary that's come out and they interviewed a bunch of abusers on like what they were doing and if they knew they were abusive and they pretty much all did. Now, I want to say I haven't watched the documentary. I've only watched like clips on Instagram and there's only so much I can take before I feel I don't want to say triggered, but I really 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 dislike. watching that kind of stuff. So I keep meaning to like post about it on the subreddit, but essentially, let me see if I can find one right fast because it's worth it in a horrifying way to see what some of these abusers say. Now, I want to say in the documentary, it's mostly male abusers. Hold up. Okay, this guy. He describes his violence against women as an addiction.
It's more like your adrenaline.
Okay.
One day, he strangled his pregnant girlfriend and one day, he strangled his pregnant girlfriend until she passed out.
No.
It's more like your adrenaline jumps in and hate and anger and everything that you want to release is coming out of your hands. I'm going to kill this bitch. That's what I thought. It's like a relief in a way. I know it sounds crazy, but it is a relief. The violence is a relief. It is. Because it's an addiction. When you physically put your hands on somebody that is arguing with you, your control, the addiction of that control is there. Feels good. It's a I feel good. I'm in control. Like you're never going to talk to me that way again. One day, he strangled his pregnant.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So feeling justified to put your hands on someone and then it feeling like an addiction of power, like I'm going to power over this person, it's going to make me feel good and I have all this rage and I'm going to displace it onto this other person because now the abuser feels fine, and the victim is sitting there now carrying the weight of the abuse, and hopefully has their own anger but often doesn't, is often sitting there just terrified or wondering what they did wrong or something like that. Um, it really, this is going to sound weird. There's this episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where Deanna Troy there's like a visiting psychic and like his mother dies while she's there and he suddenly, it turns out he was using this woman as a receptacle for his angry emotions so that he could go in and be a diplomat, and be peace and love and light, and always keep emotional control, etc. And so what he was doing was he was linking up with other like telepaths or empaths or whatever, and he was putting his negative emotions into them and then it was aging them. It was rapidly aging them. It was destroying them from the inside, and then they were becoming like really unstable. And I was like, this to me is exactly what happens in an abuse dynamic, I think, where they put their emotions that they don't, their ugly emotions, they put them onto the victim. And then they can be after they've destroyed the victim, they can be walking around like everything's fine because for them, they've released it. They got rid of their bad feelings. um and now the victim is carrying them and then the victim carries more and more and more. You become like an emotional dumpster for these people. Girl, I saw a video earlier by a husband who had cheated twice on his wife, one time for almost 3 years, and now ministers to betrayed or troubled couples, and he talked about limerence and deadly feelings towards his wife who he saw as in the way of his affair. That's so interesting because a lot of cheaters, when they start cheating, they mentally start downplaying the wife. They start thinking like she's bad in some way. In order to justify their own behavior to themselves. It's that Benjamin Franklin effect thing, but in reverse that you see abusers do. So if you're in a relationship with somebody and they suddenly start nitpicking you, I forget what it was called, but there was like a phrase for it. Basically, like, oh, this is like the cheater switch up. They have to put you down now so that because they're putting this other person up. Yeah, that's terrible. I'll have to find the link and put it on the comments here later. I'm about to serve pulled pork sandwiches. Okay, on the most human day ever. LOL, my bad. Well, yeah. Oh my gosh, have like a thank you for coming by. It's always good to see you. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy your pulled pork sandwiches. It's very southern. Here in where I live, they make a lot of the pulled pork sandwiches with vinegar, and I'm not a fan. So I don't know if you're doing that but I assume not. I assume they're delicious and not made with vinegar. Or they are made with vinegar and you and I live in the same state, in which case, um, so yeah, I will talk to you next time. So let's see. Talk about anger and rage. What was the other thing?
Girls, we don't.
I wanted to talk about, where are my notes? Oh, okay. This is what I wrote: status versus fairness. Trying to argue for fairness when status is the issue. Okay. So what I was thinking is how so many victims are dealing with someone who's mistreating them and they think, oh, okay, I just need to be reasonable. I just need to explain this in a way where we recognize fairness, and then this other person will recognize what's fair, and then we'll have like, the discussion. But somehow it never, ever, ever, it doesn't matter how good your argument is, what is intrinsically fair, what is reasonable, how reasonable you're being, they're going to treat you like you even bringing it up as a problem and indicative of you being unfair somehow. That DARVO, that the deny, attack, reverse, victim, and defender. And it always takes victims by surprise. And I think it's because they don't realize it's a status thing. They're thinking the issue is fairness, so that you're going to have a fairness discussion with this other person. When in reality, the issue is the fact that you are in a lower status position as far as they're concerned. So you can't bring things up. You don't have authority to even have that discussion in the first place. And whatever they decide is fair. Whatever they want to do is reasonable. And so that's why they can change their mind, for whatever they want, and it's not consistent. And so if you're on the other side of that, you're like, wait a minute, I'm confused. You said this last week, but now you're doing this week. And it's because the underlying idea is that they have higher status and they can do what they want to. And if you've seen President Trump, he's said essentially a very similar thing. If I'm president, I get to do what I want. And it doesn't matter that there's a democracy or a rule of law or that there are precedents that are set. That is literally does not matter to him. What only matters to him is what he wants and what he wants to do. And he will just move on to the next thing. So when you're trying to talk to someone like that, and before they're president, let's say they're yelling about how Obama is acting like a king and how wrong that is, et cetera. And then he becomes president and he starts to act like he wants to be a king. And you're sitting here, you're like, wait a minute, I'm confused. I thought you said that was bad. It's only bad because he wasn't in the position of kingship in his mind, and now he thinks he is. So even though Obama was never a king, and even though the president is not supposed to be a king, reality, what he's arguing for completely shifts based on where he's at in that status dynamic. The argument really is this person shouldn't have that status, and it's wrong that he does. And now I have that status, but it's right that I do. So whatever I do is okay. Whatever this other person does is wrong. I don't understand. Bro, you leave me alone all day. And then suddenly, like, I made sure they have food. I did cuddles before I started this. I'm absolutely baffled. All right. Well, anyway, this has just been a really weird night. I'm sorry. This live has not been great. And very scattered, and I apologize. But anyway, I hope you all have a great weekend. And I'm just gonna end it here because, like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's just been thing after thing. Anyway, I will talk to you next time.